At last, the new season of Doctor Who has started with a double bill of episodes containing Space Babies and The Devil's Cord. I have watched them both, and by the time this review goes out, hopefully you will have done as well, because this will be going out after the episodes have been screened on BBC One on Saturday evening. But yes, in this video I'll be giving my thoughts on Space Babies, obviously with spoilers, that kind of goes without saying, so don't watch this if you haven't watched the episode yet, and I'll do a separate review for The Devil's Cord. I think that just makes most sense because there's so much to talk about. So with this episode, I think, in a nutshell, it was okay. You know, it was standard, it was average fare, it was kind of like a means to an end, I think. It had some nice moments in there, you know, some nice moments full of heart, a lot of charisma from our two new leads, you know, Shugat and Millie Gibson. They were fantastic throughout and had lots of fun moments. But yeah, the story, it was kind of a predictable sort of story. It was kind of what I expected it to be in terms of the twists and things, but let's get into a bit more detail of that now. So I think before we go any further, the first thing to talk about is the revised title sequence, the first thing that we see in the episode. There's no pre-title scene or anything like that. Now, casual viewers will be completely none the wiser about this. You know, there won't notice any difference between this and the version we saw last year. But the fans have been waiting for this moment to come. At long last, you know, we have some significant improvements here with how the logo is integrated. It's no longer just a 2D flat, like PNG image. It's a proper 3D render. And there's also, I think, at least one new shot in there as well, showing off some more planets and stuff. That was a really nice surprise to be greeted with. I think some of the reviews beforehand had kind of intimated that this was the case, but even so, very, very nice to see. And then we pick up exactly where we left off at the end of the church on Ruby Road, at the end of that story, you know, with Ruby entering the TARDIS. We kind of see that moment from a different angle. I suppose it's funny to think that Mrs. Flood is there in the background throughout this, not that we see her in this version of the scene. There are some different shots, there's some different music, and then we kind of have that moment again, beat for beat, where Ruby says, you know, who are you? The Doctor says, I'm a doctor, and then we continue from there, you know, exactly where we left off, and see exactly what happened next. And I thought actually that was a really nice way to open this episode, a really creative way, you know, to kind of allow this to be a fresh start, while also kind of picking up from where the Christmas special left off. Because this story has that kind of strange job to do, you know, it's the second episode of the Doctor and Ruby's adventures together, but it's also a season opener in its own right, so it has to kind of be a jumping on point for people that might not have seen Christmas. And then we have that scene of the two of them there in the TARDIS, you know, with Ruby asking all these questions of the Doctor about who he is and where he comes from, all that kind of stuff. It's nice to see some of the sort of legacy of the Jodie era being honoured there with references to Gallifrey and how Gallifrey was destroyed by the Master, except here it's just simply referred to as a genocide, so it's quite a nice sort of concise reference there that new viewers will be able to understand, which also honours the past. We obviously had that prehistoric sequence with the dinosaurs, the whole butterfly effect thing, which we already knew about from the trailers. You know, I think in execution, I'm not quite sure how I felt about it, to be honest. Like, it was a bit of a weird one with the whole Rubython Blue thing. I did like how the Doctor kind of breathes new life into this butterfly again, to kind of bring it back to life and to save the day, solve the problem. A simple solution, a bit of a contrived solution, but hey, I kind of like what it says about the Doctor and how he is this being who is just kind of the beating heart of the universe almost, I suppose. Then the story kicks off proper with the TARDIS landing on the baby station, and, you know, we meet the boogeyman. We have Ruby's first reactions to various things, like being in space, being on a spaceship or a space station, you know, seeing planets, seeing the universe. That lovely scene where she's there with the Doctor on the deck or whatever it is, kind of looking out over space, and the Doctor is kind of giving this speech about, like, what motivates him and what keeps him going. That moment kind of called back to similar moments in The Beast Below or The End of the World, for instance. And then also, you know, similar callback, we had a thing with Ruby's phone, with her calling her mum, Carla, you know, back in the present day, much like how Rose did to Jackie from Platform 1. You know, to fans, that's a kind of a very obvious kind of reuse of the same idea or a similar idea, a similar beats. But I suppose that story there like 20 years ago now, or almost 20 years ago, so it's okay, you know, to kind of retread that ground. I think that kind of goes for a lot of the stuff in this early section of the story, the kind of scenes that are quite exposition heavy, for example, where the Doctor is telling stuff to Ruby that she kind of needs to know in order to progress forwards. You know, as fans, it's very much kind of going through the motions and going back over stuff we obviously know already and that we've heard before. I guess you have to remember that new viewers, you know, do need to know this information themselves. There are times now I'd say I did feel a little bit too exposition heavy or a bit too simplistic or too stripped back, but I guess striking the balance there between catering for older fans and catering for brand new fans is a difficult thing to do. I think that leads on quite nicely to our guest cast, so to speak, because again, it's a story that doesn't have a lot of guest casts. You know, there aren't many other people in it aside from the Doctor and Ruby. Most obviously, we have, you know, our main feature of the episode, the thing it's named after, the space babies themselves, who are kind of the makeshift crew of this space station, and they're all there zooming around in their pushchairs, and they can all speak as well. They've done like a lip sync effect, or they've got an actor to record the dialogue, and then synced up the actual babies' mouths to match, which, was kind of not entirely convincing, I would say. I applaud the kind of ambition to do that, and it was a nice gimmick, you know, with the whole thing with the space babies. They were funny, you know, maybe they kind of outstayed their welcome a little bit. I did like all the parallels to both the Doctor and Ruby in terms of these babies being abandoned there and not knowing their parents, and I suppose, to all intents and purposes, being orphans. And the idea that they immediately assumed that Ruby and the Doctor are their mother and father, you know, simply because no one else has been to the space station in that time. So they were nice and cute, and there were lots of adorable moments between them and the Doctor, between them and Ruby. They kind of verged on being a bit too silly, perhaps. And the same applies to the whole twist in the end where the boogeyman is made of their own bogies, which, yeah, is kind of predictable, really. And then the whole thing where the space station is able to eventually, you know, go off to this refugee planet or whatever it is at the end because of all of the nappies that have been piling up there, you know, for 6 years that they can use as a fuel source. All that stuff was kind of goofy and childish, I suppose, in a way that Doctor Who hasn't really been in the last few years. I mean, I was kind of thinking about this, and in terms of the most recent example, I would say maybe like In the Forest of the Night is the most recent thing I could think of. Maybe there are other ones, but in terms of a story that kind of fully embraces the fact that this is a show for children, I suppose, and is trying to appeal to children in that way, which doesn't necessarily make it a bad thing, but it's definitely a different thing, and something which, yeah, I kind of felt, okay, maybe this episode isn't so much for me. The other guest character we had was Jocelyn Sancerre, I believe she was called, played by Golda Rochevelle. You know, again, with her, she served her purpose. I wouldn't say it was a standout character or anything like that, or a role which kind of gave much opportunity to do too much with it. It felt a bit simplistic, a bit one note. You know, obviously she was functioning in the story to kind of reinforce all these themes about, you know, being alone and the dangers of being alone, I suppose, and all that kind of stuff. You know, tying again to all this stuff about abandoned children and people that are adopted and all that kind of thing. Then the last piece of the jigsaw was the story's antagonist, the boogeyman, who from the start I kind of predicted was going to end up sort of being a good guy in a manner of speaking, you know, by the end of the story. You know, obviously we had that twist there where Jocelyn tries to eject it out into space, but actually, like, the Doctor realises in that moment, no, you shouldn't be doing this. You know, it's not the bogeyman's fault that it's a monster or anything like that. You know, it's the only one of itself in the universe, and like all these children, and like Jocelyn and Ruby and the Doctor, you know, it can't help how it was brought up. Thematically, that was a nice touch, and I did like the recurring motif of pushing the button, where, you know, the Doctor and Ruby push this button on the lift to escape the bogeyman when they first arrive, you know, on the baby station, and they first meet the bogeyman. And then by the end of the story, the Doctor is pressing a button to actually close the airlock and protect the bogeyman and save the bogeyman. The way that kind of subverted and kind of came back round full circle. It was nice to have a kind of conventional monster, in inverted commas, you know, kind of conventional green, gunky monster with the bogies and the snot and all this kind of stuff. You know, again, very much playing into all that kind of kid-friendly material. Aside from that, we had some story arc stuff, which I'll discuss in more detail probably in another video, but just in summary, you know, all the stuff with Ruby and the flashback to the church on Ruby Road, with her and the snow, with her mother, this hooded figure pointing at the Doctor, and the memories changing there, or at least that was the implication, I think. There was even a cameo from Susan Twist as a kind of a space pilot or crew member or whatever it was, as the baby station's field logs were being played back. I'll admit, I completely missed that the first time round, which is the whole beauty of what they're doing with this character. So overall, with Space Babies, you know, I would say it did its job. It was okay, it served its purpose, it was basically a means to an end, a bit like a story like Smile or The Beast Below. There were certainly some nice moments in there with the Doctor and Ruby particularly, and some nice kind of building stuff there in terms of the broader series themes. And the plot tied into that nicely, though it was a bit simple and predictable. But what did you think of the first episode of Season 1? And did you watch it at midnight as soon as it was released, or wait until the Saturday night BBC One broadcast? Be sure to let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please do leave a like, and subscribe to the channel if you're new for more Season 1 content over the coming weeks. But otherwise, until the next one, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye for now.